What's up, artists? Welcome to our next element of art. This is space. No, it is not when you travel through the stars. It is space as in an element of art by which positive and negative areas are defined, or when a sense of depth is achieved in a work of art. So, what in the world does that mean? So first, let's start with the sense of depth and look at this picture by Grant Wood um, here. All that means is a sense of depth is achieved in several different ways when you're making a two-dimensional work of art. One of the ways that it's achieved is by things getting smaller as they go back in the background. So you can see even right here in the very front that these crops, whatever they may be, are getting smaller as they get farther away. So that gives the artwork a sense of depth. Also, the buildings, as they get farther away, are getting smaller and smaller as they go back. Yeah, there's one way back here and way back here. So as those go back, they're getting smaller. The trees are getting smaller. The hills are getting smaller. That's one way that you achieve a sense of depth. And we'll talk about a few more as we move on. So here's a simple work of art that shows this sense again of things getting smaller. But another way you achieve depth is by things losing detail as they get farther away. So you can see how this tree, which is the one that's closest, and this tree have a pretty good amount of detail in them. You can see highlights and shadows. But as they get farther back in this foggy area, they start to lose their detail. And this one back here just looks like a blob of shape. There's no real details to it. Even in the grass, you can see this grass that's on the bottom of the page is more detailed, and as it goes back and gets closer to the trees, it starts to lose some of that texture that it has. So all of those things provide a sense of depth. Again, the same thing happens. The rocks that are close have lots of detail, and as they get farther away, they start to lose some of their richness of color. They start to lose some of their detail. And when you get way back here to the mountains, you're only seeing a couple of colors really in those mountains that are reflecting the sun's light. That's why they're yellow. Another way that you create distance is by overlapping, and that's one of the reasons I include this particular picture, because it's really easy to see how this rock is close, and then this is a bit farther back, and this rock's a bit farther back. The lake's behind that, this rock's behind that, and then these mountains are the farthest back. And that's easy to tell because one is under the other, so to speak. And so you understand that this one's closer and they get farther and farther away. We naturally understand that, but we don't always think about it. So as artists, if we understand it and we think about it and we want to apply that to our work, we can use overlapping to create depth in our works of art. So we've talked about some of the ways that we can create value. Let's go over them again just real quickly. So size is a way. Things get smaller as they get farther away. You can see even in this picture here that as things go back in space, they're getting smaller and smaller. Good use of perspective here. These buildings get smaller. Texture, things start to lose their texture as they get farther away. Look at the texture that's up close here, and as it gets farther and farther away, you lose that texture. Things overlap. There's lots and lots of overlapping going on here as things fade into the distance. Placement. We didn't talk about this one yet, but normally you know that something is closest to you in a work of art, a two-dimensional work of art, because it's going to be at the bottom of the page. Now, the exceptions are if something's flying through the air or there's a tree branch that's hanging into the side of the picture that's close up. But the general rule is that the closest thing to you is going to be closest to the bottom of the page. That's almost always true. And as they get farther away, it goes up the page and gets farther and farther away. So that's another way that you can create space. Color and value. Things get lighter and duller as objects go back in space. So you can see here it's very vibrant up here close, and as it gets further away, it actually changes color and starts to turn blue and loses some of its vibrancy. So that is space in a nutshell. One of the things we didn't talk about is positive and negative areas. All what positive and negative areas are areas that let's see if we can find something here. Look at these trees, okay, in this picture right here. This group of trees are very dark. That the trees themselves would be the positive area, and the things outside of the trees would be negative. Again, if you look at the top of the hill here, the hill is the positive space. The sky behind the hill is the negative space. You can see this a lot more easily in things like logos, whenever the actual logo is the positive space and the white area around it is the negative space. And we use those two things to help our eyes see. Most of the time, as beginner artists, you look at the positive space, but you don't think about the negative space. So you have to think about the shape of the negative space and the shape of the positive space and how they fit together. And we'll do some exercises this week that'll show you those things and give more of an example of negative and positive space. It's very helpful. I know for me it changed the way I did my artwork when I understood negative space. So I look forward to getting into those projects with you, and I hope you have a better understanding of what the element of art space is.